At the young age of 19 months, Helen Keller was struck blind, deaf, and mute after a severe illness. Her inability to communicate with others was extremely frustrating to her and everyone around her. She often went into fits of violent rage out of frustration until her and her family were at the end of their rope, and it seemed no one else had any idea of how to deal with Helen or help her with her disabilities. Then a friend and caretaker, Miss Fuller, devised a way to teach Helen to talk by putting her hand on her face and position her hands over her lips and her tongue while she spoke to Helen. And eventually, Helen was able to duplicate those positions with her own mouth and speak words on her own. Helen's life and those around her were forever changed, and she was able to live a very rewarding life as a famous author, disability rights advocate, political activist, and lecturer. Her example of living with and even thriving with her disabilities has been an inspiration to people around the world for decades, and many of the necessary benefits and conveniences that people with disabilities have today in our society are directly contributed to the miraculous work and example of Helen Keller and Miss Fuller. And in the gospel today, we hear of a man with similar disabilities who was brought to Jesus by friends who begged him to heal him. And in this particular gospel account, Jesus takes the man away from the crowds alone and then touches his ear and tongue while looking up to heaven and groaning, "Ephphatha, be opened." And immediately the man could hear and speak plainly again. Just like Jesus healed so many others with their infirmities throughout his public ministry, and by doing so, he radically altered their lives and the lives of those around them. And after he did, in this case and in many other cases in the gospel, Jesus makes one request, a small, direct, clear, and simple request of them. Don't tell anybody. Keep it to yourself. But they went on and told everyone all about it anyways. Now, the reason that Jesus wanted to minister in secret at that time was not out of false humility, but out of the real concern that it was not yet time for him as his true identity of the Messiah to be revealed. He needed time to redefine the common Jewish misconception that the Messiah was going to be a political, militaristic king who would deliver them from the Roman occupation and oppression. He had to be able to travel from place to place and preach the good news without being hindered by so many people at the time. And he also needed to prepare his apostles and disciples for his coming sacrifice on the cross. He needed to teach them about the meaning of his suffering and death so that when it happened, it wouldn't be too high of a hurdle for believers to overcome while they waited for his resurrection and his victory over sin and death. But by these people ignoring Jesus' command to be quiet, it became more and more difficult for him to move from place to place freely or even have time to eat or sleep. Of course, they meant no harm, as they were exceedingly astonished and super excited about the miracles and wanted everyone to know how Jesus had done all things well. But the fact of the matter is, when someone helps you or tells you something in confidence, it really isn't a good idea to blab it to everyone, no matter how good intentioned we might be. God gave us ears and a mouth to communicate with others, but like all God's gifts, we are to use them according to God's will, which helps us grow in love and for Him and for our neighbors. But too often we use our eyes and our ears and our tongues and other body parts according to our will or the tempting of the evil one to sin, which separates ourselves from God. And when it comes to anything that causes us to sin or separates us from God, it would be better for us that we not have those things. For as Jesus said, it would be better to enter in the kingdom of heaven with certain body parts missing than to throw our entire bodies into hell. So this morning, I think we should ask ourselves, how good are we in keeping someone's secrets when they confide in us and ask us to hold something in confidence for them? All of us need to have people in our lives who we can trust with our private thoughts, our joys, our sorrows, our fears, our hopes, our dreams, and even our failures without fear of it being broadcast to other people. Being able to be that person to someone is a powerful gift of friendship and love. When someone confides in us, their innermost private thoughts and situations are still theirs. They remain theirs. They are not ours. I have so many people who talk to me in private about all kinds of things. And those conversations remain private unless they ask me to share it with a specific person for a specific purpose. In my ministry as a deacon, I hear a lot about people's sins. And I'm glad that they have certain things they can get off their chest by sharing it with me. But as I tell them, I'm not a priest, and I can't give them absolution. But through the sacrament of reconciliation with a priest, they can get it all off their chest, receive sacramental healing, and know that their secret is safe forever in the confessional. Because when a priest forgives in the confessional, it is Christ who forgives and puts our sins as far as from the east is from the west and heals us as if it never happened. There's a story about a religious sister who Jesus appeared to in her chambers and told her that he wanted her to go to the bishop and tell him to build a church in this specific community. When she went to the bishop dismissed her with unbelief. So Jesus appeared to her again and told her to go back to the bishop and tell him to build a church. She did, and the bishop tried to dismiss her, but she was adamant about what Jesus wanted. So the bishop told her that if Jesus appears again, ask him what I confessed in my last confession. And if you can tell me that, I'll believe you, sister, and I'll build that church. Less than a week later, the sister returned to the bishop, and he asked her if she had seen Jesus again. She said yes. Then he asked her, did you ask Jesus what I confessed last? She said yes. So what did Jesus tell you about my sins? And she responded, Jesus told me he doesn't remember them anymore. And the church got built. Like I said, everyone needs friends to confide in whom they trust with the privileged thoughts and their private thoughts. To be accepted and not judged while seeking a path to peace with confidence that it will stay private. God wants us to be those kind of friends. But when it comes to ultimate privacy, confidence that what is said is never going to be repeated to anyone else, and the assurance of pardon and peace, nothing compares to a Catholic priest in the confessional, who through the ministry of Christ's church is the absolute best friend any of us could ever have this side of heaven. Jesus is not secret anymore, so we should be exceedingly astonished and super excited about the miracles that Jesus has done for us in our lives through the sacraments and through so many other beautiful, wonderful things God has done for us. Ephathatha, be opened today and always for opportunities to tell people about Jesus while you imitate him in doing all things well.